If you are a business that holds stock, so that could be a business in distribution, in manufacturing, or even retail, the working capital cycle is a phenomenal cash flow metric that not only gives you an indication of your cash flow, but also can give you an indication of how optimal your operational processes are too. So the working capital cycle will tell us the amount of days it takes to convert our raw materials, our stock, into cash in our bank. So that is what the working capital cycle gives us an indication of. So at the end of this calculation, it looks far more complicated than it is. At the end of this, we will have a days. So if we come out of this with a working capital cycle of 45 days, then that tells us that it takes us 45 days from the point of receiving stock in our business to receiving cash from our customers. And that's why I love this metric so much, because it's really easy to get your head around and understand, and you can easily apply that in your business. So if you know that, for example, the costs in your business equate to £50,000 a month and you've got 45 days, then you know that you need to pay for 1.5 times those costs to be able to fund your business before you can generate any cash. And it's really powerful when thinking about growth as well, because you've got that really easy calculation to be able to dial up. So the working capital cycle is made up of 3 different elements that go into a final calculation. Now, on their own, these individual elements are really powerful and every business should be tracking them. But although this looks complicated, these numbers are all numbers that every business should have readily available if they're using any sort of online bookkeeping system. So if you've got Xero, Sage, QuickBooks, anything like that, these numbers should be at your fingertips. So actually, this is a calculation that can be performed at any time. And I know when I was working as a finance director, these numbers I would be reviewing on a weekly basis, and it was the job of the finance team to support the operations of the business to drive these numbers in the right direction. So the first one that we will start with is having a look at the DSO, which stands for Days Sales Outstanding. And this gives us an indication of, on average, how many days it's taking customers to pay you. So if you invoice the customer on the 1st of every month, when can you expect that cash to come into your bank? So to calculate this, you take your trade debtors, which, as I said, should be available on Sage, and you divide that by your sales for a rolling 12-month period, and then you times it by 365, because there's 365 days in the 12-month period that you use for your sales. And that will give you a number. Now, in the UK, the most common payment terms are 30 days every month. So it's typical for businesses to have a debtor day of around 45 to 50. But if you're working with particularly big businesses like blue chip organisations, supermarkets in particular, then it's not uncommon for your debtor days to be right up at sort of 80, 90, even more. So you want to keep your debtor days as low as possible. That's the goal. But the issue with that is that that means that you have to extend less credit to your customers and get your customers to pay you quicker. So to make this number as low as possible, it's all about the processes that you've got in place for getting your customers to pay you quickly. So when I was a finance director, the credit control team, one of their biggest metrics that we would track every single month would be debtor days. This is what everybody was targeted on, and was the main focus of the manager. And this is a really good indication of how well you are managing your credit control processes and getting your customers to pay you on time. So the second metric that we use for this calculation is the DIO, which stands for Days Inventory Outstanding. And this gives us a similar indication. What this will tell us is from the day we receive stock into the business, how long it takes us to ship that stock. So if you have if you're in a fast moving business where you don't hold stock for very long, then your inventory days could be as low as, single digits even. But most commonly, you'll see that businesses could have inventory days, as with debtor days, up near 100. So really this comes down to how well you're managing your stock. And if you've got just-in-time processes, in place or something similar to that where you're delaying ordering stock until the point that you need it, then you would expect a lower number. So again, with the DIO, the lower the number, the better. And we want to have stock delivered into the business either when we're ready to use it immediately in manufacturing or when we're ready to sell it on to our customers. And to calculate the days inventory outstanding, it's a very similar calculation. So you take your stock balance and you divide it by your cost of goods sold. So that would be any direct costs or cost of materials that you've got within the last 12 months. And then again, you times it by 365. And these numbers again should be readily available on any bookkeeping system that you've got. If you know what your gross margin is, then you know what your cost of goods is. So the final number that goes into the calculation is DPO, which stands for Days Payables Outstanding. And this is the amount of money that you owe to your suppliers at any one time. Now, the difference with C is that you want this number to be as high as possible. So with debtors and stock, we want the number to be low, but with payables, we want the number to be high because that means that we're taking as much credit as possible from our suppliers. Now, I will publish a video and I'll put a link to it to tell you exactly how you can maximise this number and drive this number up and maximise as much free credit from your suppliers as possible. So make sure that you check that out. Now, the days payable outstanding, again, is payables, divide it by your cost of goods, times it by 365, okay? And that tells you, again, how many days it takes you to pay your suppliers from the point of invoice. So once you've calculated your DSO, your DIO, and your DPO, then you can put it into this calculation to do your working capital cycle. So you simply take your DSO, calculation A, plus calculation B, less calculation C. And that will tell you exactly how many days it is taking you to convert raw materials or stock into cash in your bank that your customers have paid to you. Now, for some businesses that are either growing quite rapidly, so if you've got double-digit growth, or if these numbers fluctuate quite a lot, maybe you've got a seasonal business, then a really good tip, instead of doing this over 365 days, would be to do it over 90 days instead, okay? So you can do that just by taking either 12 months sales and times in by 365, or take 3 months sales and times by 90 days. Both will give you a really good calculation that you can use in your business. So, as I say, when you work as a finance director, your job is to do calculations like this for the business and to go and speak to the sales team and the credit control team to try and make sure that this number stays balanced for the business, because driving the number low as possible is not always the right thing for the business, because at the end of the day, giving credit to customers is a sales tool and helps you win business. So there is a balance to be had between driving the numbers low and balancing that commercial aspect. But as a finance director, this was exactly what myself and the team would be responsible for doing, is providing this information to the business and supporting them to get these numbers to the right level for the business, ultimately with the aim of having the lowest working capital cycle possible. Now, why I really like this calculation is because it gives you quite a holistic view of your business in a snapshot. And if you've got cash flow difficulties, as pretty much every business worries about cash flow, and there's a difference between worrying about cash flow and having cash flow in your mind versus having cash flow difficulties. And this can give you an indication of where those cash flow difficulties could be. So, for example, if your debtor days is higher than your payables days, then this is a really solid indication that you've potentially got a business case to go to your suppliers to say, look, we're selling these products into the marketplace. in the marketplace, our customers are demanding 60 days from us, but you're only giving us 30 days. So can you support us to continue to grow in this marketplace? So that's a really good indication there that something might be out of balance. And also, if your inventory days are very high, then that is an indication that maybe you don't have the right levels of stock in your business, or that there's potentially some improvements in managing your stock and your inventory levels. So give the working capital cycle a go. I will put on my website, www.profitcashgrowth.com, a Excel template which will do this calculation for you if you can just plug in these key numbers. And so I'll put that available for free to download from my website. Just go to the resources and free help section and you'll find loads of helpful information. But have a look for working capital cycle, and I'll put an Excel spreadsheet down there, and let me know how you get on using it. I'd really love it if you do use it. Send me your numbers and I can give you some tips on what I think might be out of kilter and where you have an opportunity to make some improvements too.